Caroline's just popped a note in the chat just to say that the meeting will be recorded. So thank you for that. It'll just be the main part of the meeting that's recorded rather than the breakout discussions during part 2. So thank you. Okay, Carol, I think we're probably ready to go.
Okay, that's fine.
Over to you.
Then we'll do it. Yeah, we've got 31 now, so that we can do that. So has the recording started?
Yes, it has.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to welcome you all to the biannual Integrated Care Partnership Assembly, which is a platform for engagement and an opportunity to connect as partners around the delivery of the Integrated Care Strategy. When we met in October, we focused on developing community-based prevention initiatives that will reduce health inequalities and deliver the integrated care strategy that we all signed off to. When we get to item 3 on the agenda, we're going to spend the second half of the meeting focusing on trauma-informed practice and looking at the current approach and the impact of this, which is relevant to all partners. Laura Hill and Francesca Green from Hereford and Worcester Health and Care Trust will be joining us for the second half of the agenda today. We will record in the main part of the meeting, and you will need a mobile phone to complete feedback on Mentimeter during this part 2 of the meeting. We have received a number of apologies, and we would like to welcome the deputies and the new organisational and sector representatives to the meeting. And in addition, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank those that have contributed previously and moved on, and also those who this is their first meeting. So if Ali, if you could put up a list of those who are have given their apologies and have, in some cases, there is a substitute for them, I'd be grateful.
Should be coming through to the screen now, hopefully. It's just loading at my end. There we go.
You will note that Councillor May is not with us today, and I think we need to bear this in mind, and this might apply to some other people today as well. We need to bear this in mind because our meeting today coincides with the local elections that are taking place in various parts of Worcestershire. And I think when we look at the meeting next year, the summer meeting, we need to take that into account. With regards to those who have been supporting and attending the ICPA meetings before and the delivery of the strategy, but who have or are moving on, I'd like to thank Rachel Jones of the West Mercia Police, Sarah Dugan of the Health and Wellbeing, Hereford and Worcester Hereford Community Trust, Carol Camino from the Worcestershire VCSE, Elizabeth Davis Ward of the University of Worcester, who has moved to a different university, Fraser Rickerston Care England, who's had a change in role, and Matt Pearce, who at the present moment is the Director of Public Health for Herefordshire, but is taking on a new role at the end of June in Berkshire. So I want to personally thank him very much, but I'm sure that the ICPA would also like to thank him for all that he has done over the years that he's been with us in contributing to the work that we've been doing. I'd also like to welcome the new members to the ICPA as sector and partner representatives. They are Stephen Coleman, who is the Managing Director of Worcester Acute, Esther Passingham, who's the Voluntary Sector Strategic Lead for Worcestershire, Charlie Lloyd, Mercia District Employer and Partnership Lead, and Lewis Holmes, Digital and System Transformation Project Manager for Care England, and Dr. Helen Scott, University of Worcester, Head of School University and Worcester Rep. And from a personal point of view, I'd like to welcome back Esther Passingham, who I've probably known for 20, 30 years, since she was knee-high to a grasshopper, and I worked with her mother, who was on the council with me in Worcestershire, in Redditch, and I worked with Esther as well when I was in Redditch. So that's a bit of a blast from the past, because we haven't actually, I can't see her face, but we haven't actually met up for the past 10 years probably. So that's a interesting situation.
Good to see you.
Yeah. Welcome, Esther. Have we got any extra apologies, Ali, to the ones that you've put up on the screen?
Thank you, Carol. Not that I'm aware of. Zoe Cottrell was the last one this morning from kind of Herefordshire carer representatives. And thank you for doing such a comprehensive job managing all of those different pieces of information. I think
that's all right. We now move on to the ICPA notes of the 4th of October 2023. And I want us to confirm whether these are a correct record of the meeting for those that were present at that time. Do we all agree that they are? Yes? Anybody doesn't agree? No, that's fine. Okay, we go, that's fine. We move then onto item 2 of the agenda, which is the review of the first year of our integrated care strategy. And it's basically the good health and well-being for everybody 23-24 delivery. And I pass over to Ali.
Thank you very much, Carol. I'm just going to cover off a very brief introduction. So you've got attachment 2, paper 2, that came out with the agenda. I was just reflecting what an impossible task it is to reflect in a single paper all of the integration, delivery, improvement of outcomes that's happened across Herefordshire and Worcestershire within those places and neighbourhoods. So it's very much a kind of high level review. So what you'll see is it's a short paper that's in 3 sections, and really focuses on the delivery of the 8 commitments that we've got within the integrated care strategy and the shared priorities, and also delivery of the health and wellbeing strategies at place. Those of you who were part of that engagement and development of the strategy, approval of it through this forum in April last year, will recognise that. But for new colleagues, you'll see that that is on the back page of the paper, the summary strategy on a page. So what I wanted to do was talk a little bit about the delivery of the Joint Forward Plan, because that is the 5-year delivery plan for health services that really responds to those shared priorities and commitments, and describes in a very much broader and longer sense some of the priorities for improvement in outcomes across health. So the first part of the paper describes some of the highlights there, such as the work we've done around the development of health inequality ambassadors, the recent launch in that space to really deliver that strategic goal to make reducing health inequalities everybody's business. Some of the work we've done around making training available to all ICS partners in terms of increasing personalised care, understanding health literacy, and the impact that has. Some of the work we've done to further deliver the support to carers and the commitment to carers that we made a couple of years ago, and some of those sort of core services in terms of the improvements we've seen around maternity services across Herefordshire and Worcestershire, a stronger focus on prevention through our frailty strategy, and also improving access to things like diagnostics through our community diagnostic centres. So through the links in the paper, you'll see there's a lot more detail in there in terms of the Joint Forward Plan. And then in the second 2 parts of the paper, they really focus on the delivery at place. So in Herefordshire and Worcestershire, and in a minute I'll pass to my colleagues Matt Pearce and Lisa McNally to share a presentation with you and take you into more detail around that. And then in terms of this agenda item, we are going to have a panel Q&A at the end of this to give you an opportunity to ask any questions there, and also to share with the panel some of your hopes for delivery around 24-25 and where you want to see our continued focus. Thank you very much, Carol. I'm going to hand over to Matt now. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Ali. So firstly, nice to see everyone. I'm just going to take you through some slides. As Ali said, just kind of outlining where we are in Herefordshire and the contribution we're doing in terms of the integrated care strategy, and then also through our health and wellbeing strategy. So I thought just to begin with, just give a bit of an update in terms of, or a recap where we got to. So we adopted the same vision as the integrated care strategy, which was really helpful, I think. So we're all kind of aspiring to do the same things in Herefordshire. So very much around good health and wellbeing for everyone. So really tackling the health inequalities. So it's been a year in. we had a plan on the page, if you like, so just to remind people where we were. And in Herefordshire, we very much wanted to focus on two priorities, so recognising that sometimes we spread ourselves too thinly. So very much around best start in life and good mental wellbeing across the life course. And then we also had some supporting priorities, recognising that whilst we can't do it all, there are some really key things that we wanted to tackle as well. So that was around supporting people to age well, access to local services, good work for everyone, supporting people with complex vulnerabilities, reducing carbon footprint, and improve housing and reduce homelessness. So for the first year, we've very much been starting on our two core priorities, and I think over the coming years there'll be a bit more focus as well, looking at those supporting priorities. And we also had a kind of an ambition of what we want Herefordshire to be like in 10 years. I'm not going to go in huge amounts of detail on these, but we very much wanted our thriving communities, and I think these are probably shared across the ICS, if I'm honest. So we wanted to ensure our communities are resilient, where children and young people grow up, where they feel valued and loved. And we wanted that opportunity for all. So really about accessing good quality services, fair employment, and really supporting the disadvantaged. And then we wanted to support healthy and sustainable places as well. And I'll go on to that a little bit in terms of how do we make the environment conducive to healthy living, recognising that one-to-one services and service provision will only have a minimal impact on behaviour and health, life expectancy. I mean, actually the environment around us is really important to that. But then finally around healthy people. So recognising that people do have a role to play to self-care, look after their health, and lead those healthy lives that we all want them to do. So in terms of best start in life, this was a slide I put up when we launched our strategy about a year ago now. And it was talking about why we chose best start in life. And again, a lot of this is reflected in the integrated care strategy. So the text in black was kind of highlighting, excuse me, the key issues for Herefordshire. And all I've done is highlighted in green, really, some of the progress made against those. Now, we clearly can't put some of that progress down to 12 months of work because we're still doing a lot of work around developing our action. But I think it kind of reflects some of the positive indications that we're going in the right direction and there's been some good progress made. So, for example, infant mortality. So we know babies under the age of 12, in the age of 12 months, we have a higher rate than national dying early. And we've already started to see a reduction in stillbirths at Wye Valley Trust. That's really positive, and we're hoping that that will reflect in the data when that's published. Challengingly, we still struggle with child tooth decay, although we're doing some fantastic work around that, and we know that our rates remain stubbornly high. But there's also some good news around smoking rates amongst pregnant women. And though it was on a downward trend, we're no longer higher than the national average. So that's some fantastic work in terms of, again, smoking support services within our maternity units. Same with children in care immunisations. We've done a lot of work recognising that we were higher than the national average, and now we brought that indicator down to be lower than the national average. So again, some really great news. And then childhood obesity, that can vary from year to year, but that's also no longer higher than the national average. But again, that's a really complex, challenging area, and I think it's we need to keep an eye on that one. We have some challenges around hospital admissions, around unintentional and deliberate injuries, and we're still doing some work to undertake that. And whilst breastfeeding rates weren't statistically higher than the national average, we still recognise how important that is. And I think you'll all be aware of the challenges we have in children's services in Herefordshire, and we've still got a long way to go, but we know that the proportion of children in care is on a downward trend, but still statistically higher than the national average. So there's lots of positives in there, and clearly lots more work that needs to be done, but I think it's good to kind of reflect the effort that's being taken by the Health and Wellbeing Board and all our partners across the system in making that difference. So in terms of kind of what other things we've been doing, again, a lot of this is in the report that Ali talked about. It's been very much around consolidating an implementation plan that's owned by everyone in Herefordshire, so not just public health, our wider partners through the One Herefordshire Partnership, who now have oversight of that best start in life priority as they do for mental health. We've recommissioned our nursing contract as well, which includes 2 additional visits. So again, recognising that we need more than the 5 mandated visits, so a 4 to 6 month oral check and a 3 to 4 years preschool check. So really making sure we support those parents and those children at that critical time in their lives. And we're also piloting a new Healthy Schools, Healthy Tots framework. So looking at health promotion within the school, recognising that children spend a significant amount of time at schools, and it's a great setting for us to really encourage healthy behaviours. I've touched on the smoking rates. The other thing we're doing, although our oral health isn't as good as it can be, we're doing a lot of work around supervised toothbrushing. And it is noted in the report, we're now active in 45 settings across the county and 3 SEND schools. And over 1,700 children are brushing regularly in Herefordshire. So that's a really great achievement. Unfortunately, we've not yet seen the outcomes of that initiative, but we're hoping that that will have some impact over the coming years. We're also doing a lot of work around our study whole parenting programme. So this is an evidence-based programme about how we can support practitioners and parents to increase their confidence in parenting. And again, regionally, we've had the highest number of registrations into that programme. So we're really pleased with that work. Again, we just recognise that parenting is fundamental to how we raise our children and address some of those challenges we're facing. And then finally, we're just doing a bit of work around the children and young people surveys. So we've just launched that in Herefordshire. And this is going to be really important for us to understand what the needs of children and young people are across our primary and secondary schools. So at the moment, we've got about 50% of our primary schools taking part in that survey. So this is where children of various different ages complete an online survey to reflect their behaviours, where are the key issues, and that will help inform our commissioning going forward. And we nearly have about 90% of secondary schools. So that's a really exciting piece of work that will kind of inform how we go forward. And then notwithstanding a lot of work around early help and prevention, we've done a lot of work around increasing early help assessments across the county, so we can obviously prevent children from going into care. So the second priority was around mental well-being. It's probably been a bit more challenging area for us. I think we all recognise the challenges across mental well-being and mental health services across the country, and not just Herefordshire and Worcestershire. A lot of our work has really been understanding that a bit more. So we've been doing a big health needs assessment. And there has been some progress made against some of these indicators, but I think we need to do a lot more work to really understand those challenges, particularly around inpatient admissions for young people with mental health disorders, and also hospital admissions as a result of self-harm. So again, we're just verifying some of that information to really understand, is that a data coding issue, or is there a real underlying problem there that we need to tackle collectively across Herefordshire? But we know with the cost of living crisis, that's still a concern for many people. And we're doing lots of good work through our Talk Community initiative. So again, in terms of the things we are doing, we've got an implementation plan that's going to our Health and Wellbeing Board in June around mental health. We've got good governance in place, and we've developed outcomes dashboards as well, to really illustrate kind of what are the indicators we're looking to address, what are the targets we're trying to achieve, and that's going to be really helpful to monitor progress over time. I've talked a bit about the mental health needs assessment, and we're also doing quite an innovative piece of work around community signposting, working with Taurus and colleagues across Talk Community about how we bring together all the different community signposting roles, social prescribers, health trainers, health and wellbeing coaches. So we have a single point of access and a streamlined management structures across our primary care networks. And this is all about recognising that a lot of problems aren't medical within our community. They can often be solved by communities, by connecting people with community groups. And we really want to utilise that resource as best we can in a collaborative nature, under the auspices of One Herefordshire Partnership. We're also doing some good work around health inequalities. Again, working closely with primary care networks, and we've developed quite an innovative health inequalities dashboard, looking at where those inequalities exist across the county, and what are the key issues we need to tackle collectively across the primary care network footprints within our neighbourhoods and our Talk community. So an exciting piece of work, and really empowering primary care networks to proactively look at what we can do to support people within the communities. Also doing work around NHS health checks, which is really positive, and we've had a high uptake across the county over the last year now. And we've also, through funding of the ICB, appointed a suicide prevention officer work. So again, trying to address some of those concerns around our suicide rates and looking to develop a new strategy over the coming months. Last slide is, I didn't really quite know where to put these things, but these are kind of the key enablers, if you like, in terms of some of those things that maybe straddle each of those priorities, but are also worthy of a note. So I know Christine's on the call today. So we're still progressing our work around that community paradigm, so that shift around how we can empower communities, how we can get public sectors to work differently with partnership partners. And we've just awarded 12 grants to a total of around £136,000 to focus on those community-led initiatives. And it's some exciting work. We've talked about it in this partnership before, but again, how we can get communities to come up with some of their own solutions to tackle some of the wicked challenges that we're facing. And so there's some fantastic projects which we're more than happy to share with people in terms of what those projects entail. Some are only just small amounts of money, some are a bit more, but we're working to really help understand and evaluate what they might look like too. And then we've had collective buy-in from partners to appoint a community paradigm program manager role as well. So recognising that we all value that work and we want to take that forward. And that's going to provide some strategic oversight and really get some momentum between empowering our communities, recognising those solutions are there. One Herefordshire partnership, I've touched on that a lot. As I said, it's holding our 2 health and wellbeing board priorities. There's a whole host of work I've not talked about that partnership is leading on, but I think it's worthy to celebrate they were shortlisted at the 2023 HSJ Awards as part of place-based partnership and integrated care category, so really reflecting the innovative work they're doing, and that partners are really kind of working together. We're doing a lot of work around the JSNA and the LGA. I'm also looking at talk community and developing a One Herefordshire vision for what talk community looks like, and that would support the wider community paradigm. And then finally, I won't go into too much detail on everything else, but we are just trying to focus on that wider determinants of health. So we've appointed a new officer within planning in Herefordshire to sit within the public health team, so really focusing on the planning processes and policies, how we can influence that wider determinants of health as we develop our local plan in terms of what does housing and transport look like over the next 20 years and how we can shape that to encourage healthy behaviours. So that's it for me. I'll stop there. Thank you for listening, and I'll hand over to Lisa.
Thank you, Matt. That was brilliant. And as I've said in writing earlier, I'm really going to miss you. Absolutely awesome colleague. Right, so I shall share my screen and have a look at some things in Worcestershire. Can someone let me know if that is visible?
Yeah, looking good, and it's on full screen share, so we can see it now. I can see some nice knights on horses.
That's them. Yeah, so those two guys are my representation. I just want to talk a little bit about how we do things in Worcestershire, and I think really this represents how we're doing things as a system as well, increasingly. Over the last few years, traditionally when I first started in public health, it was all about what is now called, sometimes unkindly, a deficit-based approach. Professional services run by experts, doing things to people. And then the asset-based approaches rode into town. And now you will often go to some meetings and you'll hear people talking about asset-based approaches and be quite disparaging about deficit-based approaches. And often the underlying assumption in the dialogue is that these two things are opposed to each other. You're either asset-based or you're deficit-based. And in fact, in reality, the two things are very compatible. So in a debate, you might hear that a deficit-based approach proponent might say, well, people need professional services. They need expertise. They need to be able to go to something and receive a service that is designed by professionals and that they can trust. And that's undeniably true. And it's never stopped being the case. Asset-based approaches will say, well, but we also have to add validity and to add sustainability into the improvements that we make. We need to involve people. We need to start with their ideas for solutions and build on those rather than always do things to people. And my argument is now that I think we need both. We need to integrate both of these approaches and find a place where we're using them both and getting more than the sum of the parts. So in terms of how we do things in Worcestershire, that's it. What we try to do is we integrate asset-based and blended in with deficit-based approaches. So we commission high-quality professional services while also ensuring significant investment into community-led projects and programs. So just a couple of examples. In Worcestershire, we commission school nursing and other professional support via family hubs. Very much, to a large degree, a deficit-based model. People will go along and speak to an expert and receive advice and maybe, in some cases, treatment, such as a vaccination. But we also give health and wellbeing grants to schools on top of that. And we say to schools, you come up with your harebrained scheme for how you could improve health and wellbeing in your school community, and we'll give you a grant to make it reality. And schools love that because a lot of schools, they've got that idea that they just haven't been able to find a budget to implement. And we've seen everything from therapy dogs to forest schools to meditation interventions, all sorts of things that schools know themselves because they know their community will work. We've given them a lump of cash to go and make it real. And so in a sense, we're early help, what we're doing there, and early intervention in people's lives, we're blending asset and deficit-based approaches. Equally, we're just getting started on the delivery of our Healthy Worcestershire programme. And that will involve experts delivering physical activity and lifestyle support groups, experts, in a sense, to some level, doing things to people, giving them the benefit of their expertise. But around those groups, grants will allow the groups themselves to come up with their own ideas and implement their own ideas for enhancing health in their area. So hopefully what you'll see through this presentation is a blending of asset and deficit-based approaches. So like Matt, I'm going to take a bit of a life course approach because it makes sense, doesn't it? It's one way to order things. So what have we seen? What have we seen in the last year? I've been here just over 12 months now, 14 months. Feels like longer, but in a good way. I mean, in a good way, because so much has happened and so much we've been through, so much together as a team and as a system in that last year. And we've seen some good outcomes. So low birth weight rates have dropped to below the national average. Our health visiting service, big shout out to the Health and Care Trust. Health visiting service currently scores well above national averages on its performance metrics. And maybe in part as a consequence, our rates of child development at 2.5 years are significantly better than the national average. One thing I just want to focus on for a second is another outcome with smoking and pregnancy. There are few more valuable outcomes from public health interventions than a pregnant smoker quitting. The impact on that, as you guys know, is enormous, both for the child and for the mum and for society. So work with maternity services significantly reduced the smoking and pregnancy rate. If I just show you that graph, we were in trouble in Worcestershire in the past. That's our red line in terms of smoking and pregnancy rates. And look at what it's doing. From below the national average in 2016, skyrocketing above the England and West Midlands average. We could not allow that to go on. And so a period of development started. The team started to commission with midwifery services. We addressed midwives' low confidence to deliver brief interventions. We introduced new pathways for relapse support. And the upshot over the next few years, you can see that we've turned it back down again. So firstly, the new service model from 2019 onwards, where we partnered up with maternity services, already started an increase. And in the last 12 months especially, we have introduced an enhanced partnership with extra elements to the work, where we've brought it right down to 9%. So a real success story that has material benefits for our population. Other outcomes that I think are positive for our system, there's the MMR 2-dose data. That data is slightly out of date now because we've all been frantically jabbing everything that moves, haven't we, in relation to MMR in the last few months? But I've been really just so pleased with the partnership work that we've seen with NHS colleagues. And also, I think what made a real difference for us this year was setting up vaccination clinics where we border Birmingham. And we really did create a line of defence, if you like, along Bromsgrove, Redditch, with pop-up clinics. And we're still at the point in our system where we haven't seen that many cases of measles, despite bordering a few areas that have really been hit hard, that are still seeing overall 20 to 30 cases a week. Also in young people, our schools and youth services have led to a large rise in the proportion of young people meeting physical activity recommendations. So we've got to the point now where 4 of the 6 most active areas in the whole region are in Worcestershire. So that's a very, very important outcome. And of course, linked to that, our childhood obesity rates have fallen this year to be the lowest in the West Midlands region. So real progress in the last 12 months that have, that are taking Worcestershire where I think it should be. Not just average, but up there with the best. For older adults in community wellbeing, the latest data showed that we had the lowest rates of loneliness in the country. And of course, loneliness work is something that really benefits from an asset-based approach. We've worked with primary care and public-facing programs to increase bowel screening. Again, a real system partnership approach. And both of these achievements were on the telly news and the radio. So building trust, I suppose, in health improvement across our system by getting on the radio and saying, look, you guys as residents are doing a great job. Keep working with us, encouraging people to make Herefordshire and Worcestershire somewhere really quite special when it comes to health improvement and living healthy lives. And also in our portfolio in public health, we cover community safety and crime prevention. Sometimes people don't think of these as health topics, but they're completely wrong, because they are. Fear of crime, radicalisation, the impact of being a victim of crime, and the impact of being a perpetrator of crime are associated with really quite awful health outcomes. And so we have to address crime and take a public health approach to it as well. So our local Prevent programme, which our team run, which is aimed at preventing radicalisation and terrorism, has been rated by the Home Office as strong across all domains of work. And there's not many areas in the country that have been rated strong across the board. So yeah, that was a real achievement for our community safety team. On illicit vape sales, again, we've got an innovative programme around schools and also trading standards. Trading standards are also in public health. And we've got some innovative work that blends both supply and demand side work, trying to bust those traders who do sell illegal vapes and illegal tobacco while trying to reduce the demand side by work with schools. And again, that was featured by BBC National News. And we're currently working with the PCC on a range of crime prevention initiatives. And it really ranges from the hard end. So we're working with them on what we call Operation Freya, which is around preventing homicide and serious violence and trying to engage with those people who are most likely to be the perpetrators of homicide and serious violence, who are also, by the way, the same people most likely to be the victims of serious violence and homicide, through community development work. And also our development work in schools has again used grants in the way I mentioned earlier to warn people about drugs, knife crime, etc., taking a genuine public health approach to that stuff. And finally, on substance misuse, again, this is a place where 12 months ago, we weren't in a good place. In fact, OHID were on our backs a wee bit, and we were very much on the naughty step. But as a complete turnaround, literally, I got back off holiday last week to be told by Andy that we've heard that OHID have now included Worcestershire as one of the top performing 5 areas nationally for substance misuse services. So from being kicked around the room by OHID civil servants, we're up there now. We've made improvements on alcohol treatment and also, of course, continuity of care, engaging people as they leave prison. And you can see the difference there in the engagement rates. And finally, awards aren't important, obviously. You know, they're not important, except they are, and we got loads of them. And my mate Claire has just been down to London, not to see the King. She's been to go and present at the LGA Awards for smoking and pregnancy work. And awards, yeah, they're nice for the ego, but they also build trust in the work that we're doing as a system amongst our residents. So I think they're important. So there. So I'll stop sharing and release you all from my presentation, hopefully.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And
Is
Matt,
the
I really
screen off, Ali?
It is, yeah.
Oh.
It's off now. Thank you for that. I think there's so much to celebrate, isn't there? And so much that we haven't had an opportunity to talk about. So what we're going to move on to now, as I said, is a short sort of question and answer panel and an opportunity to share for ICPO members to share their sort of thoughts and priorities as we go forward to delivery in 24-25. So what I'm going to ask colleagues to do, if you're on the panel, which is kind of Krishni, Carol, Lisa, Matt and David, please keep your cameras on, but if everybody else could just put their cameras off for a minute until you're ready to ask a question, then it'll allow us to in a virtual space feel like we've got our panel in front of us. So what we'll do to kick off then, I think, is I've had a couple of questions which have been supplied in advance, so I will put those to two of our panel members. And during that time, I'd encourage anybody who has a question around the paper or presentation or wants to share your thoughts to put your hand up in a moment or pop the question in the chat, and then I'll come to you and give you an opportunity to introduce yourselves and turn your cameras on as well. Christine, if you want to turn off your camera, feel free. But don't worry if you don't. Krishni, the first question I think is probably best put to yourself, if that's okay. So this was, how has the integrated care strategy influenced the priorities for the Integrated Care Board over the last year and as we go forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. And can I just start by saying, congratulations to everybody. It was really fantastic to hear about the work that's been done and actually see data showing changes and impact of the work. So a particular thanks to Matt and Lisa and their teams, but all the partners who contribute to that work. So thank you. So just, I think it's important to say, Ali, that, when we write or develop these strategies, they need to live. We don't want them to be documents that just sort of sit on you sign off a strategy, it sits on a shelf and nothing happens. So I think alignment between strategies and plans is really important. I think Matt referenced, how much that was the case in terms of the health and wellbeing strategy for Herefordshire, and I'm sure that's the same in Worcestershire as well. Certainly for the ICB, obviously, one of the things we developed is our joint forward plan, which you talked about at the beginning, and that's our response to the strategy in a very kind of long-term sense. But very specifically, we've reflected a couple of those priorities very directly in our corporate objectives for 24-25. So best start in life and tackling health inequality is very specifically part of our objectives, which means they'll translate into deliverables that individuals will have within the ICB to progress. And by way of sort of illustration in terms of what that means in practice, I mean, clearly, we one of the things we've really focused on is health inequalities. It's one of the aims of the ICB that we were very clearly, required to tackle. And we've built some really good foundations, which you mentioned and is covered in your report, but we really need to now take that to the next level. So, for example, you know, using the vans that we've introduced to reach out to populations, but also the Health Inequalities Ambassadors Network, which is a really big step directly linked to our governance as well. So that we've got all health inequalities basically covered in all of our programs of work, and we've got that built into our governance. So that's an example of something we're doing. And I think your report, Ali, as well touched on maternity, and you know, Lisa and Matt talked about the importance of Best Start in Life, and I think illustrated some examples of that as well. So we've done a lot of work to improve our maternity and neonatal services, which is very pleasing to see in the course of last year. We've also got to build on that because Best Start in Life is such an important commitment. So hopefully that just gives a sense of some of the things we continue to work on, but have already made some starts on.
Thank you, Krishni. Much appreciated. I think that's really helpful, and I can confirm those corporate priorities have flowed through to my personal objectives for my appraisal this year. So it's all working.
We've got a question from Ian Hardiman.
Yeah, thank you, Carol. Over to Ian. Ian, would you like to pop your camera on and introduce yourselves to colleagues who might not know you?
Yes, certainly. Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me now. District Council, Wyre Forest, that is. I'm Cabinet Member there for Housing, Health and Wellbeing. And this is my third meeting now that I've attended. Thank you. Sorry to talk specifics, but Matt in his presentation referred to children's dental problems. I couldn't help my memory working on the word fluoridation. Fluoride. Is this something that's still used these days? Is it a part of your consideration?
Yeah, I'm happy to pick that one up, Ian. So thanks for the question, and that's something that's been very topical in Herefordshire over the last few years. And as a health and wellbeing board, we're kind of looking at what those opportunities and whether that's something we want to pursue and take forward. At the moment, there's a big public consultation going on in I think it's the northwest of the country, where they're looking at quite widespread implementation of fluoridation. And at the moment, actually, I think Worcestershire, I think are similar in a position. Lisa will come in a minute. I think we're kind of waiting to see the outcomes of that in terms of what that might look like. What's the kind of government's appetite and the public's appetite? So it is certainly a contentious issue, but it's one that I know our Health and Wellbeing Board are really keen to explore and look at the options and make sure we take people with us, because I think part of that is about engaging with the public and listening to their fears, their concerns, but also there are some that support it. So it's certainly something we're watchful of, and the evidence is pretty strong, to be honest, in terms of fluoridation will have a positive impact on oral health. But Lisa's got her hand up, so I'll go to her. She might have something to add.
Yeah, Matt, I mean, obviously concur with what you just said about the evidence base. I've seen firsthand. I used to work up in Samwell. Councillor Hardiman is an area where we saw health inequalities across the board, but it was fully supplied with fluoridation, and our oral health outcomes in children were much better than the model would predict based on deprivation. In Worcestershire, just to update you, we've got cross-party support for fluoridation. Some of Worcestershire is supplied with fluoride in the water, part of it isn't. And I've written to both the Minister and to OHID, Office for Health Improvement and Disparities, to request on behalf of both parties, on behalf of all the parties in the council, to request that that's extended to the entire county. But as Matt said, they're dragging their feet a wee bit, and apparently they're piloting work in the northeast of England. Don't know why they were selected, but we're on the case.
Can I just add to that? With Herefordshire, it's quite complicated because I don't think we have got all party support, but also we have more than one provider of water in Herefordshire, so that is an added issue, and of course that goes across the border into Wales, and also we have a significant number of people who are actually not on mains water anyway, and so that is quite a significant proportion of the population. So it's not a simple it's not a simple case, really. I came before here to Redditch from Redditch. Redditch had fluoride in the water, and I didn't even think about, when I came to Herefordshire, questioning whether it did or did not. And I suspect most people, when they move into an area, don't check before they decide to buy a property whether it's got fluoride in the water or not got fluoride in the water. But it does seem to be very controversial when you start to discuss it with elected members.
Thank you. Much appreciated, and I think an important topic. Thank you, Ian, for raising that one. I'm going to come to Sarah Raystrick now. So Sarah, you've popped a question in the chat. So I think it would be helpful if you introduce yourself and frame that to the panel. But I'm going to open it up and say, actually, if there's any broader ICPA members who would like to contribute to answering that, I think actually that would be really helpful too, wouldn't it? Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks. Yeah, so sort of the opposite end of the spectrum, I guess, to Ian's question. So looking at the big picture, really great presentations, and so good to hear what's happening. And I think my question really, or I'd like to hear from the panel and others, is reflections on how things feel different now we've got this integrated, the ICPA, and a really integrated way of working. So great stuff that's happened. How could we do things even better? And are there any blockers or things we need to consider as we really see how we can move our plans going forwards? I didn't introduce myself. You asked me to do that. I'm sorry. So I'm Sarah Raystrick. I'm one of the non-executive members at the ICP.
Thank you very much for that question, Sarah. I think that's really helpful. I'm going to pause for a second because, as you say, I think it'd be really lovely to hear from some of the broader colleagues on the call who've been with us on this journey. So, Charlie, whilst you've not been with us on journey and one of the newer members, I'll invite you to pop your camera on and contribute to this discussion.
Thanks, Ali. I think Ian Hardman was actually in front of me before somebody.
I think that's a legacy hand, Ian, is
Oh,
it?
is it?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is.
Thank you.
No
Charlie.
problem. Got to be polite. So, yeah, I think just in terms of from a DWP perspective, Sarah's absolutely right. The partnership is absolutely key. It's no secret, obviously, DWP sort of strategic agenda really in this space is about the journey to work, but also to remain in work as well. And I suppose if you have had the opportunity to go through the Health Foundation's report that has been released recently in terms of inequalities, particularly life expectancy, particularly, it's no surprise that when you start to look at particular wards around Hereford and Worcestershire, that some of the lower social economic sort of areas tend to be the ones with the lowest life expectancy and so forth. And there's a bit of a theme that goes through that. So I definitely agree that there's a lot of room to enhance the great work that's already taken place. And like Sarah says, we can't all individually solve some of these issues. And I suppose from our point of view, greater emphasis on those that are from more challenging backgrounds to move into work out of economic inactivity, then I suppose opens up that education piece in terms of actually, it is important to brush your teeth twice a day. It is important to, register with a GP. It is important to do some of the things that we'd like people to do to obviously improve their quality of life. So, there is a knock-on effect in terms of how that affects multiple generations. And through some of the data that you can find through Statics Board, the NOMUS data, there are pockets of multiple child families around, some that have 5 or more children in those particular communities. So again, you're looking at how do we address all the different root causes that lead to some of these issues. That's very much, I suppose, where some suggestions from a DWP perspective is that integration of DWP disability employment advisors within GP surgeries, for example, social prescribers linking in, community centres that have multiple different organisations around them. And I suppose a really good example of how that works is that there's the Youth Hub at Worcester, for example, which is geared towards youth. But there's multi-agencies based around that young people then can get exposed to different organisations, community mental health, wellbeing sessions and so forth, but also lead towards skills and employment towards the end of it. There's a youth hub that's in development in Hereford at the moment. There's been some estates issues, but again, it would be expected that that replicates. And there's a huge opportunity there that by, I suppose, utilising neutral space, it's not a case that you're going into a job centre or you're going into a GP surgery. It actually neutralises, I suppose, those perceptions that people have, particularly in those lower social economic sort of areas. So just a couple of sort of like ideas there, but I definitely welcome from a DWP perspective that opportunity really to expand those partnerships and look at what is the art of the possible there. So just a couple of thoughts from me, really.
Thank you very much.
We've got
Charlie.
another question from Ian.
Thank you. Adrian, is it Adrian next, I think?
My apologies, I'm struggling to remove my hand. I do apologise.
All right. Okay.
So over to Adrian. Thank you.
Right, thanks very much. I mean, this does build on Sarah Rastrick's comment. I mean, my view is our relationships in the ICS have been much stronger than they have for many years. And, you know, I've done far too many years on the county council, really, where, I mean, it's so refreshing for us to be able to talk directly to ICB, you know, board members or the rest of it. I don't think the system is better. It's perfect yet, and I'm sure that it could be better. But I think that it's been a positive step in the right direction in answer to Dr. Rastrick's comments. And I think the proof of it is actually shown in the improvement that Lisa, you know, alluded to in the fact that we have much more visibility now of performance and how things are going than we've ever had before. So I welcome that. But part of the reason why ICSs was set up, and this is the bit that interests me, and I don't know who on the panel is ever going to be, David might be able to answer it. I mean, one of the real aims was we were going to try and move on to a single electronic care record. Now, what I'm slightly at sea with is how much progress we've made, how much partnership you've seen from the councils in this, and is it more complex in a two-tier system than I ever thought? Because I seem to remember that we were quite successful on getting a grant during the Matt Hancock days on this, because if we're really going to major on the prevention work, and I've had a discussion with my director this morning about the terrifying prospect of artificial intelligence and how we can use it to predict, you know, a single care record going forward would make such a difference if we're going to grasp the prevention agenda. But as an elected member, I have no idea as to how we're doing.
Thank you, Adrian. Really helpful question. I know we're making some progress in that area, so I'll hand to David on that one, and then we probably need to, in terms of time, sort of close off the questions there. There is a question about the frailty strategy in the chat as well, so David, so I don't know if you want to cover both off in your response, if that's okay. Thank you.
I mean, I've had some general observations on the opening part as well around the role of the Assembly and the impact it's had. I mean, I've certainly, from a personal perspective, found having that platform for engagement and connection with a wider range of people very valuable. So, you know, conversations with the crime and justice sector, for example, that we probably didn't have as specifically as we did before, has highlighted a whole range of particularly health inequality issues that we know we need to tackle better, and we then have the ability to take those forward with specific action plans. So that was one of the kind of key benefits that stood out for me over the last year. In terms of the frailty strategy, Karen's question in the chat, it was very much developed as a system-wide strategy. So can we have a system-wide, across Herefordshire and Worcestershire, consistent approach to tackling the issue of frailty for the local population that would then translate and be passed across to the two place-based partnerships, the one Herefordshire partnership and the Worcestershire partnership, to come up with specific action plans and specific initiatives to deliver the ambitions of that strategy. So the strategy itself has recently been published and is now moving into that phase of kind of local action-based planning. So Karen, so over in Herefordshire, I would expect the One Herefordshire partnership to be thinking about how that's taken forward. And connected in with local groups like the care home sector that you represent, etc. So more work to do on that, but more work coming, I would suggest. And then on the single care record, I think there's been a lot of work over the last few years on certainly the NHS world trying to get a single healthcare record, the summary care record, where paramedics and people in ED and people in primary care can see the same sort of information. We have made some good progress on that. I think we've got a long way to go before we'd be confident that we could say we've got a single care record where we could join up information in such a way that we have genuinely good insight into where the greatest risks to people's health are that would enable us to tackle that issue more effectively. And often it's information governance, which is the thing that seems to be the persistent barrier that we need to try and tackle and work through. So just a really practical example that Harriet Brown and I have been trying to resolve around housing, health conditions exacerbated by people living in damp housing, just trying to connect up what we know about damp housing in the community alongside the health record of people who are apparently coming into health systems with issues around asthma and other conditions that are made worse by damp housing. It's more difficult than it should be to join that data up and find who those people are and go and help improve their housing status to reduce their health demand. But we're working through it, and we need to prioritise that. Having a single care record will help resolve that, but it won't be the only solution. It's the information governance, which often is a problem for us.
Adrian.
Well, if I could just come back very quickly. I mean, it strikes me that we are having slightly different approaches to this across the country. I mean, if I look at Dorset, I think they've taken the view that they proceed until apprehended. And that would be sort of pretty much my approach, because otherwise we get just bogged down in this data protection and governance issues all the damn time. And, you know, I think 5 years on, David, I'm slightly disappointed we haven't done more. I mean, clearly what's happened is the interface with adult social care and indeed children's social care, there appears to be next to no progress on that. Although internally inside the NHS, which you would have thought was the easy bit, you've made some progress. I'll have another moan in 6 months' time.
Yeah. Can I just one last thing I didn't mention there, Adrian, was that we're buddied up as an ICS with the Nottinghamshire and Nottingham system, and Krishni may have been thinking the same thing. So we had a buddy meeting with them last week, and they talked us through their approach that they've taken to tackling some of this information governance barriers. I won't go into the details, but it's something called a Section 251 agreement with the Secretary of State that has been signed off to enable them to progress at greater pace. So we're going to take that forward and see if that helps unpick some of these things. I mean, it's a good challenge, proceed until we're apprehended. The only problem is with that, it's unlimited fines if you do get apprehended, and that's a risk, a significant risk that we would need to be wary of if we took that strategy. But I take on board your challenge, and we'll proceed.
Yeah, I mean, the cynics of us say that's how the Data Commissioner funds his operation, but hey ho.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Matt. Carol, shall I hand back to you at this point?
Yeah, I think yes, please. There doesn't appear to be any more questions. We're going to now take a 10-minute comfort break, reflecting. We are sort of meeting over the lunchtime period. After the break, we were looking at a focused around the impact of trauma on outcomes and how we can work together as system partners to incorporate trauma-informed principles into our organisations and services to improve outcomes for local people. And that will be led by Matt. Okay, so we'll have a 10-minute break now. Refresh your cup of tea or your cup of coffee, or do whatever you have to do, and then we're back in 10 minutes.
Thank you, Carol. And a quick appeal from Caroline, please don't leave the call because the breakout rooms have been prepared behind the scenes. So thank you for that. So we'll be back ready to start at 10 past promptly. Thanks, Carol.
Okay.
Colleagues.
Are you there?
I'm here. You're right. It's Councillor Gandy, isn't it?
We're going to run a bit late, aren't we?
I must say, Carol, it's very civilised having a short break in between a 2-hour meeting. Thank you. Feel re-energised and ready for the topic-based discussion shortly. Sorry, Carol.
You can't have cake if it's virtual. That's the trouble.
Only if you bring your own. I'm not going to
Only
tell
if you
you
bring
what
your own. Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you what I've just eaten. We'll just keep that quiet. I ate a lot of fruit yesterday.
Well, my husband's gone off. My husband's gone off to a coffee morning in the village, and he's bringing me back a piece of cake.
Lovely. We've got welcome back, colleagues. We've got 1 more minute. To kick back.
I think, yeah. Right, I think we probably ought to start.
Yeah, that looks
okay. Right, so this session, as I say, will be led by Matt, and the section will include 2 10-minute breaks to breakout sessions to discuss and feedback via Mentimeter. Okay, Matt, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Gandhi. And can I also introduce my colleague, Dr. Laura Hill. So she's a consultant counselling psychologist and psychological lead for the Herefordshire Neighbourhood Mental Health team. So Laura's actually going to be doing most of the speaking today, but I'm just going to help do a bit of a double act with her. Laura, are you okay just to share the slides for me? And
yeah, of course.
I'll get going. So just some context really about why we felt it'd be really useful to talk about trauma through the Integrated Care Partnership Assembly, because it's something that actually, I think, as you'll hear from us, really kind of touches the lives and all the things we do across the system. And we'll come on to that in a lot more detail. From my own personal perspective, I came across trauma and certainly became more aware of it probably about 15 years ago when I was working in Gloucestershire at the time, and we're doing a big analysis of our weight management services. And it's through that conversation with psychologists that were supporting people with quite significant excess weight, morbid obesity, where we've often approached issues through kind of eating and physical activity, it was really apparent that actually some of those individuals had experienced trauma in childhood, which led to them using food as a way to kind of cope with some of those challenges and traumatic experiences that they dealt with. So it kind of gave me a whole new perspective about, when we're coming across people that maybe have health issues or challenges or a whole host of different things, sometimes to actually look at it in a slightly different way. Laura's a far more of an expert than me in this by any sense of imagination, so she'll be able to cover that. So could you just go to the next slide, Laura, please? So in terms of what we want to get out of the session today, we haven't got huge amounts of time. We have got a couple of interactive sessions, so I won't talk any longer, but we just want to talk about what we all mean by trauma. I think we recognise that there would be people that know a lot about trauma. There'd be people that know a lot about adverse childhood experiences. There'll be some people that don't know much about it. So at the end, it really good to get to a position where we're kind of all on that same page and have got a good understanding. Looking at a bit about the evidence of adverse childhood experiences, and importantly, how that actually impacts our organisations. So as a system, how can we see trauma manifest itself and what could our response look like across organisations? And also to have that shared dialogue, and again, to think about how our organisations could support people that have experienced trauma going forward. And then finally, think about how we can all be more trauma informed. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Laura now. It will take you through the next set of slides.
Brilliant. Thanks, Matt. And thanks for having me here today, everyone, to think about this. So one of my other motivations for being here, just to kind of put my flag out, is that we've also been successful in a bid for a pot of money to roll out an awareness level training for trauma-informed care across the ICS. So this is really good timing for this conversation, and we can think maybe a bit today how best that gets used. So with that in mind, some of what I'm going to do today kind of parallels that training that we're going to be offering, so that you get a bit of a flavour of what that might look like. And what we do in that training is encourage people to hold someone in mind throughout the session. So I'm going to ask you to do that as well today. Just holding a person in mind that you think this might be applicable to. And that might be someone you have worked with as a kind of service user, or it might be a colleague, because trauma-informed care is about kind of the whole picture. So if you can just bring someone to mind, that would be really helpful. So this just doesn't just become about stats. This is about people. Okay, so there's lots and lots of definitions of what trauma is. And this is kind of one of the most up-to-date ones. So it results from an event or series of events or a set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as harmful or life-threatening. Okay, so that's the kind of definition of what they might experience, but that can then go on to have lasting adverse effects on basically all elements of their life: mental, physical, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being. So it's a massive kind of definition, really encompassing lots of different things. So because it's so broad and so hard to define, one way that this was kind of researched was by using the definition called adverse childhood experiences. And this really broke down what we meant by trauma into kind of 10 categories, and was designed as an epidemiological study. So it looked at stressful or traumatic events that happen in childhood, including events that affected the person directly, so like abuse or neglect, but also that might have affected children indirectly. So the context that they were living in, be that mental health difficulties in the home or domestic abuse, for example. They could have been single events or long-term repeated experiences. And the first last study that is always quoted is the study by Felitti, but this was back in 1998, and it was a large study, so 17,000 adults in the US, and worth saying in quite an affluent part of the US, so hold that in mind as well. And what this study found was 3 key findings. So the first key finding was the sheer prevalence of adversity in this population. So at least 64%, as you can see, had at least one adverse childhood experience. And then another figure that's really important to hold in mind as you go through the presentation is this 4 or plus ACEs. So about 12% of the population had 4 or more ACEs, and that's often used then in kind of comparing outcomes for people. So huge prevalence, more than anyone kind of anticipated, of adversity. What they also found was there was a really clear dosing effect of adversity. So the more adversity there was, the greater the increase for impact on health outcomes. So it was quite clearly shown that the higher the number of ACEs, the increased number of risk from a kind of correlation perspective. And then the third key finding was that there were correlations with all of these outcomes. So particular behaviours like alcohol use, smoking, physical activity, and then also correlations with physical and mental health difficulties. So cancer, COPD, impact on depression. So it gave a really clear indication for the first time of the link between what happens to children and then their outcomes as adults. So as I said, that study was a correlation study. So of course that doesn't give us kind of cause and effect. So since then there has been lots of research into why do we think that there is this outcome, both on mental health and physical health. And one theory that is kind of quite well accepted is this idea of levels of stress. So normal kind of positive stress levels, as it refers to here, we all need to experience as humans as we're developing and through our lives. And, you know, we would get that normal increase in heart rate and stress hormones and all the things that give us that kind of fight or flight response. And then those go back down quite quickly. Then we have what's called tolerable stress levels, and those are quite serious levels of stress. So the impact with those stress hormones is going to start to impact the kind of neural networks that we make. But that is then buffered by a supportive relationship. So in childhood, for example, it might be something like the loss of a loved one. That would cause a significant stress response. But as long as there was someone available to support and regulate that child, that would buffer the impact. What we then know as having the most significant impact is what gets termed now toxic stress. And this is when there is prolonged activation of the stress response without any of that buffering support. So this is when, you know, if you imagine in yourselves, you get that kind of adrenaline rush and the heart rate and all the things that come when we have a stress response. But that is maintained and kept at that really high level. And that is when we think it can be toxic. So this is kind of shown again in this slide here. So it's really normal for us to have a threat of some description, a rise in our kind of agitation and leading to the fight or flight response. But this then would normally come back down, we'd recover and be at rest. So our body gets an opportunity to rest and recover. And what we think or does happen when people don't have this decline is it maintains at this level. So you keep that chronic level of stress. And I think that's an impact of ACEs, but particularly an impact of ACEs where there is no buffer. So there is no one adult who can help a child to regulate. And what we then know is that this chronic traumatic stress alters how children's brains develop. It impacts their nervous system, their hormonal system, and you can imagine, can't you, developing systems and the impact of that agitation on the body. So what we know about brains is that the parts of the brain that help you do kind of forward planning are really impacted, and you will see brain differences. Interestingly, similar picture to what we used to describe as the evidence for kind of schizophrenia. Is there's less neurological connections. So it's harder for people to forward plan and do those kind of front brain activities. And it is this additional stress on the body that we now start to understand why then there are such links with cancer and heart disease and all the kind of physical health as well as the mental health difficulties. So this is why ACEs matter so much. And just to hold in mind, the ACEs study looked at 10 different kind of categories of trauma. That is not to suggest they are the only ones that cause this difficulty. That was just the kind of design of the study. But any adversity in childhood, you kind of just then funnel and see the impact. And, you know, the impact on physical development, social, emotional and learning problems. So we know this affects attainment in schools, what you might see in terms of behaviours around crime and drug and alcohol use, impact on physical and mental health, and ultimately impact on early death. And there's some quite depressing figures around that as well. So I'm going to stop sharing there because we're going to move now into a breakout room, just so you can start to think, because I'm aware we've got a diversity of kind of people on the call, which is great, of how this might show up in your particular services or the communities that you serve. What might you see manifesting because of people's experiences of adversity. So if you can either go to menti.com or do a quick snap of that QR code. And then I'm going to stop sharing so that someone else can do the magic with the breakout sessions. So.
If everybody's ready, I can move you over to the breakout rooms. I will also pop into the chat for breakout rooms the code and the QR code. So hopefully you'll be able to access it once you're in there.
Thank you, Caroline.
Okay, right, I'll do it now.
Well done, Caroline.
Just a couple, which I think it's just hangovers from Ace and John who left.
Yeah.
I think we lost. I just wrote down we lost 3 extra people as well at the break who just dropped off, which is fine. So
yeah. So in terms of the,
let's just make it. Can I just make a note of the time?
Yeah,
Sorry, it's about 25 past, wasn't it?
well done.
So 35. I'll do it 34. I'll do a little. You've got a minute to go. Yeah, carry on. Sorry.
I'm just trying to get the right view on so I can share this. I'm struggling. Oh, present. No. It's tricky, isn't it? I've got other stuff on my.
Are you in? Is this Menti you're in?
Yeah. If I'm sharing my window, it's slightly.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. It's starting to come through. I'm just going to do it and we'll see.
Yeah, because it's only me and you.
It's there, but it's got other gump around it that you probably don't want to see. Do you see what I mean?
So if you click on that, see the blue present button, and the little drop down arrow, not drop down arrow, the top one.
The top one.
Yeah,
okay.
the top one.
How's that now? Does that look better? Oh,
yeah.
Hey.
So I can see now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 responses, 6 responses, and you can see them all on that slide. So I'm assuming, oh, it's just refreshing. Oh, are you flicking through?
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Stay there.
Good.
So yeah, that's working absolutely fine. I'll shrink mine down. I had it open just in case. The QR code wouldn't scan in the announcements into the breakout rooms. They've got the code. Did someone put it in the chat before? I couldn't see it. I had all the breakout rooms open, so I can't see it. Brilliant.
Fine.
You're a star. Thank you.
Well done. And there's already say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 responses. I'll just pop a note in.
Yeah. and I've just been doing from the panel questions, I've just been doing high level notes, so I've got those sorted. Oh, someone's messaged.
It's only me. So if you can, I've put all of the final slide decks, apart from Lisa's, but there was a slight adjustment, wasn't there, in the final presenting folder. So if you've got time this afternoon, if you can just pop the 3 presentations out.
Yeah.
To members, because a few people asked for them in the chat.
Got somebody, so I can see the meeting room chat. Helen Scott's going to have to leave.
Oh, that's a shame.
So let me just go in properly. Let me just go in properly because it just
you
pinged up.
stop and have a check. Hello, Chris.
Hi there, apologies.
No problem. Have you just joined the call? No problem. Colleagues are just in breakout rooms at the moment, and they're having a bit of a discussion around how trauma might manifest itself in the services and the communities that we serve. But they're coming back in a couple of minutes. So do you want to sort of stay with us and then pick up for the second, you hear the main presentation, pick up for the second breakout? Is that okay?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you very much.
No, that's fine. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
No, sorry.
I was just going to say, are you happy staying? I'm not moving. I'm not moving, Chris. Am I? No, he's going to say yeah.
No, I think the colleagues will be back in a few minutes, and actually
5 minutes.
You'll be able to see, I think, on the screen, Chris, you've got advanced review of some of the feedback that's coming back. So yeah, if you just want to have a look at that, you'll get a flavour of the conversation that's happening.
Okay, super. Thanks very much, Ali. Thank you.
Caroline, what did you say time-wise you had as 10 minutes?
35.
35, that's fine. So are you going to do a 2-minute?
I was going to do a 1 minute or 2 minute.
So give them 2 minutes, because then it allows people to wrap it up. But there's some really helpful feedback coming through already. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll give it a couple of minutes and then I'll pop an announcement in. Can I just ask, sorry, Chris, I just need to sort this out with Ali. So
yeah,
did Lisa say, no, you're fine, it's nothing. Did Lisa say she'd added in a couple of extra slides
just
to what we've got?
One slide, yeah, it was the smoking in pregnancy. So if you just drop
yeah, I'll drop a message.
Sam a note, or well, Lisa, one of them, I'm sure she'll send it across. So that's very positive in terms of progress.
Yeah, and I'll get those circulated. I'll get the free presentation circulated this afternoon.
Thank you for doing that, Caroline. I don't think there'll be any issue with sharing Laura's presentation, because the whole point is about sharing learning and awareness, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So 2 minute, where are we? Got a little bit of time. I'm going to send the announcement now, because it always takes a little bit. I know we're a little bit running behind. So if I send it now, by the time it goes through and we get people back, we should be on time. Okay.
That's fab. Thanks, Caroline.
Can I just ask, are we expecting people to provide feedback after the meeting?
No,
Or no, that's fine. I just really thought about the expiring of the codes if people
no,
maybe
it's
want to.
absolutely fine.
No,
I think
okay.
it'll be in the meeting. Eh?
Right, as soon as it clicks over to 35, I'll close the room, Sally, okay?
Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to do that now, all right?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Don't think I thought a lot about this before, but it seems to me that there's a real danger that, hello?
Hi,
Sorry,
Martin.
Martin.
Apologies. Apologies. We've dragged you back to the main room. Sincere
Okay.
apologies.
I was in mid-flow, honestly.
Oh, it's really
As
hard,
ever.
isn't it? Yeah, really
Yeah,
hard.
we were in
Oh.
mid-conversation as well.
I was cut off in my prime.
Francesca was just about to give me the answer and the solution to my question.
Apologies. Welcome back. I think we've got everybody back now. I think we've got 34 people back. I'm hoping we've got Laura back. Yeah, I can see you, Laura.
I am back, yes.
I've popped. Hopefully everybody can see the initial results from the Menti. So just let me know when you want me to take those down, Laura.
Yeah, fab. I mean, certainly in the room I was in, there was a lot of conversation was there that was quite easy to start to think about how this fitted in all, the services in the room. And, we can see quite a few of them up here about kind of unhealthy behaviours, chronic pain, patterns of abuse cycles, lots of different areas. And what we also talked about in our group was, the different touchstones. I think Ed used that word of where we can input, like there's the prevention of how do we stop this? How do we help early on in trauma? And then how can we all respond in ways in later on in people's lives that are helpful? So we will share that information out as it keeps land. So if you're still tippy-typing in the Mentimeter, do keep going and we will put that information together. But I'm aware of time, so I'm going to hand over to Matt and I will start sharing.
Okay, thanks, Laura. So we're just discussing in our group about how the good thing about, not a good thing, but trauma in a way it kind of brings different organisations together. So we might call it different things or see it manifest itself in different things. But actually, one of the reasons bringing it here is actually is a bit of an umbrella term that enables to unite us all, I guess, in terms of understanding what trauma is and the consequences of it and how it can be prevented. But many of you, as I just saw on the Mentimeter, there's a lot of research now in terms of how ACEs does manifest itself. And I just saw from some of the comments. So we know that in terms of health harming behaviours, we know that people with more adverse childhood experiences, they're more likely to binge drink. So twice as more likely to drink more and have a poor diet. And I saw that in some of the responses. They're more likely to be a current smoker. They're more likely to have had sex while under the age of 16. 6 times more likely to have caused an unplanned teenage pregnancy, and we can go on. And the other thing we also explored in our group, and I'll go on to it in a minute, is actually this is not just in relating to health. We know there's a whole host of other things that might manifest itself, and I know we're hearing from Ed shortly as well. But also in terms of criminal behaviour, education, and a whole host of other things too. Next slide, please, Laura. And I'm just going to go over that really in a bit of detail just to kind of emphasise that point. So the other thing we talked about in our group was academic attainment and developmental needs. So again, the number of ACEs you have is a dose response in terms of child developmental delays. So the higher number of ACEs you have, the more likely you can see a child with developmental delays. And again, colleagues working in children's social services and education will be very much familiar with this. And trauma-informed approaches in schools is becoming increasingly common. And how we deal with trauma rather than through a punitive lens, it's a bit more of a kind of what happened to you kind of approach. Next slide, please, Laura. And then in chronic conditions, so again, really topical at the moment, huge pressures on our health and social care system. We know that 7 in every £10 is spent on supporting individuals with long-term conditions. And we know by the time you get to the age of 60, you're more likely to have a long-term condition than not. And again, you can see with the line, that the thicker line here, that those individuals with 4 or more ACEs, a higher proportion of them have long-term conditions than those that don't have ACEs. And again, it's likely to be a dose response. So even 1 or 2 ACEs may manifest itself into a long-term condition. So again, if we can look at trauma from a preventative perspective and working upstream, we could really have an impact on that. Next slide, please, Laura. And I mentioned education as well, so we can look at adverse childhood experiences. So this graph just looks at highest qualifications from individuals from none, secondary, college and higher. Just draw your attention to the thick dark blue bar chart. That's 4 more ACEs, and again you can see that individuals with 4 or more adverse childhood experiences across those 4 different domains, they're more likely to have not being employment. So it's a real key thing that we need to look at. Next slide, please. And then crime, as I said, the police have done a lot of work around this, some really good evidence. Lisa talked about homicide earlier and violent crime and perpetrators as well. So not just the victims of crime, but also perpetrators are more likely to have adverse childhood experiences. In terms of criminal activity, this chart kind of says first time, there's actually very little difference between those that don't have ACEs and those that have 4 or more. But when you look at criminal activity that, once before 3 to 6 times and 7+ times, you can see it's more profound at that higher level of criminal activity for those that have higher number of ACEs. So you can start to see how these ACEs kind of manifest across all our respective organisations and ultimately feed into the ICS strategy. Next slide, please, Laura. And then healthcare service utilisation. So it's not just about the outcomes itself and those individuals, but also we know this is having huge impact on our health and social care services. So again, if we can shift upstream, we can really help reduce demand. So we know people with ACEs, 2 times more likely to have visited their GP in the last 12 months, 2 times more likely to have visited A&E in the last 12 months. And you can go on, about all these kind of different consequences of trauma across the system. And it can also apply to social care. And I know some people talked about homelessness as well, but we know 50% of homeless people had 4 or more ACEs. Okay, next slide. And I just did this very quickly, actually. I could probably spend a lot more time on this, but I think if you looked at the ICS strategy as a whole and looked at some of the outcomes we want to deliver across Herefordshire and Worcestershire, you can then really you could almost map the impact of trauma across our population and how that's leading to some of the big health challenges we're facing. So that was just a starter for 10, as I've mentioned: academic attainment, community connection, social mobility. There's a whole host of outcomes that's within the ICS strategy that in some shape or form will likely be connected to trauma and adverse childhood experiences. Okay, next slide, Laura. Okay.
Back to me, I think, isn't it, Matt?
Yeah.
So what can we do about this? And there's lots of different ways we can think about this, but one is early intervention. So how can we reduce adversity in the first place? And we know that if we prevent ACEs in future generations, these are kind of some of the stats around what we can look hope to improve, which is pretty compelling. And if you think about, you know, when we're looking for behaviour change, we're usually a couple of percentage can be, you know, a really significant change. So this is really important to think about. But trauma-informed practice, which is what we're thinking about today, is thinking, what can we do and how can we respond to those people that we work with in a way that is helpful when we know they've experienced adversity. And this then can be incorporated into strategic planning and thinking. And I think Matt mentioned we need a real shift in the culture. Instead of focusing on the behaviour and what we see as the kind of outcome and take the approach of what's wrong with you, it's about how can we understand what we're seeing in front of us, be that in school or in the police or in the health sector. And it is about then monitoring the impact and how do we practically put this into practice. And this is again across the board. It's about our clinical work and our work with service users, but it's also about staff. You know, the trauma affects everybody. So this is also in the teams that you work in, as well as with the people that you're working with. So one way that this has been conceptualized is called the kind of 4 R's. And this is what trauma-informed organisations need to be able to provide, that they realise the wide impact of trauma and understand the potential paths for recovery, that those in the organisation recognise the signs and symptoms of trauma in their clients, families, staff and other people in the system. It then responds by fully integrating this knowledge across the board into policies, procedures, communications, practices, and possibly most importantly, resists doing anything that re-traumatises people. And unfortunately, sometimes the way that services are set up is that we do that. So work around how can we do things differently. And then on a kind of with a person in front of you level, thinking more in the work that we do, we talk about the 5 pillars, or there is now a 6th pillar as well as these things develop, of what we need to provide with someone to be the most helpful, particularly when we know they've experienced trauma. But the kind of good news is this is helpful for all humans anyway. So it's not like we need to work out which people have adversity and treat them in this way. This is the best way to treat other people if you want to get a decent outcome. So we need to provide safety. We need to provide choice where we can. We need to collaborate. So all the work on kind of personalised care fits very much in this agenda. It is about empowering people to do for themselves, not to do for them. And that's a really important part of trauma-informed care. And it is about building trust. And I know, you know, working in the NHS, we don't always do that well. We need to do what we say we're going to do. And if we're not going to do it, we need to let people know to try and build that trust. So this is more thinking about kind of on individual interactions in front of you. And this is what we think about in the training. So does this approach really work? And I've just put in this particular case study, and I won't talk in detail because I'm aware of the time, but that this was a study up in Harper Hay where the whole local authority worked towards this initiative. And what they did was kind of disseminated knowledge, but also had structures within the organisation to keep this going. And what they found was one outcome was a reduction significantly, as you can see, in fixed terms exclusions in schools. And this was some of the costing savings that they found through this initiative, but I will move on. So what we're doing locally in health, we've been working to develop a training programme in line with the Scottish model, which is really thinking about levels of training. And now across the trust, we have a centralised awareness level training for trauma-informed care, which is the one that we're going to be rolling out in the ICS. We've done lots of co-production working with our experts by experience, and we're trying to hold this in the executive level as well. So we have a working group there, and we've done lots of work in the communities and various kind of projects. We've published the evaluation of the training, so we know it does what it says it does. So that's the majority of the work we've been doing in health, and it links very much with our work around culture and EDI in the trust as well. Ed, I'm going to hand over to you to talk to this one.
Thanks, Laura. Good afternoon. My name is Ed Hancox, Superintendent, West Mercia Police. I'm the head of prevention for the force, and about a year ago, the force started its journey in terms of trauma-informed practice. I think Matt and Laura have already really well articulated the link between trauma-informed and also preventing serious violence. So we commissioned Barnardo's. West Mercia is part of the West Midlands Trauma Informed Coalition, and through that work we became aware of some training that Barnardo's had developed, particularly towards police officers and police staff. They'd already delivered it to West Midlands Police, so we were really keen to bring that into West Mercia as well. So over the course of 23-24, we trained 800 officers and staff. And also Barnardo's provided particular consultancy to our custody units and also our online child sexual exploitation teams. Both of those are kind of key areas in terms of recognising the impact of trauma on individuals, particularly children and young people, but also, as Laura's just pointed out, making sure that we're not re-traumatising individuals in the process, which is particularly key to custody. So when individuals are brought into custody, it's really key that our custody staff, our custody sergeants are aware of the signs and symptoms of trauma and can also understand what they can do physically in terms of the environment and our processes to prevent any further trauma. And then OCSET, our online child sexual exploitation teams. These are the teams that obviously go after sex offenders, often carry out warrants, end up arresting either mom or dad in front of children. And we wanted to do something around the impact on the family that were left behind after that awful event has happened. So again, really key in terms of that trauma-informed practice. Barnardo's training, it was evaluated by University of Wolverhampton and the University of Birmingham, and showed a marked improvement in terms of perceptions and knowledge and understanding of ACEs and trauma in practice by officers and staff. So the training includes knowledge around trauma and how it impacts on behaviours, developing brain and body, ACEs and the potential impacts growing up with adversity, and then mitigating the impact of trauma and adversity through the adoption of trauma-informed practices. It's been really well received by officers. They seem to really take to it. They can see the link in terms of that early help and prevention. They can see it in terms of the behaviours that they experience dealing with individuals out on the street and in custody. And also, I think the point that Laura made around trauma in terms of our teams, our officers and staff, what they're experiencing on a day-to-day basis, and that can impact them at work. So yeah, that's the start of our trauma-informed journey within West Mercia.
Thanks, Ed. I'm going to hand back to Matt now.
Yeah, so I'm going to pick this up really quickly. So we've only got a bit of time left, but I'm keen we just at least have 5 minutes in our breakout rooms, if that's okay. So if we're okay to do that, we've just put another question in the chat, and we'll just leave this for 5 minutes and then we just come back. But I'd really ask that we kind of all contribute to that. I think it'd be really helpful because, again, we want to see some things we could really take forward through the ICPA in terms of what are some a real difference we can make, recognising lots of good practice already. So I'll hand over to colleagues in the ICB to kind of split us up for 5 minutes, and then we'll just come back, and then we've only got one slide to go through after that. So, but thanks for staying with us, and see you on the other side.
I'll just get you moved to breakout rooms now. Magic, they've gone.
Thank you.
It's okay. If we give them 5 minutes, that's 58. Is that enough time then for you to do your bit at the end with Councillor Gandy?
We really don't need to do a lot. Matt will close the meeting. So
Okay.
I think you'll have to bring people back at 2 minutes to 3 minutes to
57.
It's not a lot. It's really not long enough, is it?
No.
To kind of, 2 minutes. Do it at 2 minutes too. But I would just literally put a note in saying moving you back now. Apologies.
Yeah.
I think.
Just don't give them a 1 minute warning or anything.
We lost 10 minutes in the first half of the meeting. I probably should have
Yeah.
shortened the break. I probably should shorten the break by 5 minutes, or said, actually, do we need it? Hindsight, yeah.
Moving you back now. Apologies for the incon.
Yeah, just hang on. What I'm going to say is, can someone? I'm going to say Matt. Shout. I'm going to ask Matt to let me know. All right.
Yeah.
If I don't hear from him, we'll just make a decision.
Apologies for the abrupt
closure of
short notice. It was short to notice because it's always like, it just makes me laugh how people don't read the announcements sometimes. I'm just going to go and grab a water. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Matt says 2 more minutes.
Okay,
or have you put the code in the chat for the rooms?
Oh bugger, no. It was in the bugger. Hold on.
Don't worry.
This is another shortened time, and it's just.
It's fine.
Hopefully they. In a way, that's one of the downsides of not sharing in advance the slides, because it would have been on there and they could have referred to it, couldn't they?
Yeah.
But yeah, never mind. Never mind.
Fine. It's absolutely fine.
Have you got it open? Oh, we've got some responses pinging through.
Do you know what? I wasn't going to.
We had 24 on the last one. I had a quick look when Matt was doing his next bit of presenting. 24 came through for session 1. We're up to 4.
Well remembered. See, you're on it, as always.
Matt really won't want to if he's got another slide to rattle through.
I don't think he will. In fact, in some ways, I might not. It's there. People can look at it as we close the rooms, and then I'll take it down.
Right. I'm going to put the announcement in.
Yeah.
And then I'll close them. Okay. Right, they're closing.
So we're back.
Apologies again, colleagues, for the
abrupt. Once.
Welcome back, everybody. As I said, a sincere apologies for cutting off the conversation. I'm just sort of sharing the initial feedback for you to have a look at, and hopefully, Matt, are you picking up now?
Yeah, I'll just wrap up. So thanks everyone for your contributions. Apologies we didn't leave much time for that conversation. It was actually really important, so it would have been great to have longer. But as I say, you know, there's always further opportunities, I guess, for people to feedback in kind of what their ideas might be. There's a few ideas there we've covered around. I think I saw one about potentially having a strategy across the ICPA, greater training, raising awareness on communities, being kind and compassionate, and recognising where people have come from and understanding what trauma is. So there's lots in there. Obviously, we'll have a think about how we take this forward, what the appetite is in terms of a collaborative approach around trauma-informed practice, recognising we're not starting from scratch. There's some really fantastic things going on. I was going to finish with a quote. I won't share the slide, but there was a quote by a guy called Dr. Robert Block, and he said, "Adverse childhood experiences are the single greatest unaddressed public health issue." So it has really raised the kind of the importance of trauma and our understanding of it. But can I just pass on my thanks to Laura for helping me with that session, and Ed for coming in as well. And I say we'll share everything that people have put forward, and then we'll come with in terms of what those next steps might look like. But I'll just pass back to Councillor Gandhi. I don't know if you just wanted to say some goodbyes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to all of those of you that have attended today. I think it's been a really good session, really informative. The next session, there is a view that some people prefer face-to-face meetings, some people prefer virtual meetings, and what we think we're probably going to do is alternate between virtual meetings and face-to-face meetings. So we're going to look at having a face-to-face meeting towards the end of the year. We're looking at November, but I think we probably possibly might be governed by when the general election might be called, because that might impact upon a number of people as the local elections have today. But bearing if it doesn't happen and it happens before November, then the next meeting will be sometime in November, we hope, and we hope it will be a face-to-face meeting. Okay, and then that will be chaired by Councillor May, and then when we do the following one, we will try and make that as far away from the local elections as we can, because that's going to be an annual issue. But I do thank you all for the time that you've given up today, and for the very interesting and important comments that you've made in both in the breakout sessions and during the meeting. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Colleen.
Thank you.
Lovely to see everybody, and we'll be in touch soon to pick up. Take care.